Welcome to A Different Kind of Doula. I'm Maureen Curis, and I'm here with my colleague Colleen Hughes. And Kathleen Putnam is on vacation this week. But we're really excited to talk to you about our topic. First of all, we're all end of life doulas. We're part of the Gentle Passage Doula Collective, and we teach and train others to be end of life death doulas. But a topic that we've discussed before is bereavement in the workplace. But we're going to take it from a different angle. We all know that people have to go back to work too early after the loss of someone they love. We don't have good bereavement care in our country, in my humble opinion. Some companies do, but most it's 3 days. But we were talking about sadness in the workplace related to grief, but we're coming at it from the sadness angle today because, sadness is really a subjective experience and we succumb to it for different reasons and at different times. Grief is a big one, big reason for sadness. Um, Sadness is not depression. Grief is not depression. So just to realize and to have some tools to deal with it. Sadness can be contagious. When someone is sad and chronically sad and you're around them, it can make you sad and it can make you feel down. Um, Sadness can unsettle us to our core. It can shake us. It can surprise us. But there's things to do to deal with it, and that's why Colleen and I are here today to talk about some of the ways. We're going to list something from a spiritual center: 50 ways to deal with sadness in the workplace. So when you are going through sadness, we hope some of these will help. So, Colleen, do you want to start us off with any of the tools for dealing with sadness in the workplace or sadness in general?
Yeah, and really, I looked at that list and I said, well, there was a number of things that I truly support and believe and have done actually. And one of them is, when I would leave, and I remember this when my mother was dying, I was teaching and I was trying to split my time and I wasn't really focused. And there was an older woman in the class that I was teaching, and she came up to me and she says, Colleen, I learned something from the loss of my parents. I learned that I really needed to be there and be fully there. And she says, why don't you think about that? You don't need to be here. And I really listened to her because she was older and she had a lot of wisdom. And I taught her and her husband. And so I thought, yeah, she's right. So some of the things from that experience still stuck with me. And one of the things was I did spend time with my mother. I had to spend a lot of time. I was constantly with the doctors. We were trying to get a diagnosis so that we could get her into hospice. But it was like my evenings became extremely special. So I wanted to make sure they were relaxing, and I actually got some sleep. And that was hard, but I actually tried to make sure I had sleep because sleep was getting less and less the more I would stay up and worry about things. But the other thing was this abandoning high expectations, the habit of having high expectations. And I am a high expectation person, high standards, high expectations. You shouldn't be this way, you should be this way. And I started to realize I can't be when I'm grieving. It's just that I'm grieving. And that's what I do, and that's what I have to allow myself to do. I'll tell you the biggest thing though. I do believe in mantras, and I have a few. I have some from my loving kindness practice, but I also have one that I learned a long time ago when I was a nurse's aide in Kettering Memorial Hospital in Ohio. Every day I would pass this clock, and it was one of those sundials, and underneath it would say, "This too shall pass." And I used to remember when I was feeling really sad about something, sometimes it was the loss of a patient, I would just stand there and meditate on that. This too shall pass. And that's it, because it's impermanence and accepting and seeing sadness as a very temporary thing. And that's life. There's joys, there's sadness. And remembering this too shall pass, and just turn it into a mantra for myself. I know that this too shall pass. I say it today. When I'm like frustrated with something, it's not going to last. Even my sadness won't last. It is very fleeting. So those are some of the things I got from this, Maureen.
I love that you said sadness and joy, just like grief and joy, they walk hand in hand. And I don't like people to say this too shall pass with grief, because grief's with us forever, but sadness is not, and we can find joy. So I love that this too shall pass. There's a lumber store in our area, and they have a reader board, and they like every week they change the saying on it. And my dad had died, and we were driving by, my sons and I, and my one son said, "Look at that, Mom. It says your darkest hour will last just 60 minutes." And that is sort of like this too shall pass. Your darkest hour really will, it will pass. And so the sadness will pass, the grief will not, but the sadness will. Grief will get gentler. But I love that you mentioned that. And that just made me think of that story about the darkest hour. One of the things that I in the list, there were so many, there were a list of 50 tools you can use. Some of them were spiritual, some of them could be construed as religious. But laugh first thing in the morning, to wake up and laugh, and it really gets those endorphins going. It gives your system a boost, and it helps restore energy that's been depleted by sadness. You can laugh, you can sing loudly. And I know it sounds crazy, and if people see you doing it, they might think, is she crazy? But it is just such a good way to lift our spirits. I used to have a nurse that would sing all the time to her patients. And she said, song and music and laughter lifts our spirits. And it really was true. I mean, we loved working with her because she just lifted our spirits.
Oh, I can't agree more with the laughter part of it, and singing too, even though I can't sing. Um, I do like to hear music when I'm sad, and it takes me to a place where it allows me to grieve and to feel that and to allow my feelings to flow. The same with sad movies. They do the same thing for me, and to
Yeah.
see how other people handle the sadness in those stories. Reframing one's sadness is another interesting thing. And when I think of reframing things, kind of ask myself, and I do this often actually, what have I learned from this experience? What am I learning from this experience? What am I learning of the experience of grief? What am I learning from loss? What am I learning about letting go? I say this a lot to myself, because I stop myself, because I'm into this thing now where what have I learned from my life and my experiences? But you can break it down into smaller parts. And the other thing that is a tool that, is more therapeutic is cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, you literally reframe your thoughts and your thinking. And I've done it before, and it is extremely helpful. It keeps one from going down a very, very dark path, so.
How do they do cognitive behavioral therapy?
Well,
How is
when
it done?
I had it done, I mean, there's different exercises you give a person. So you take a situation, and then you take that situation, and then you start asking questions about that situation, kind of like, is this true? If this didn't happen, you know, what would be different, and how would you feel? And if you take something that's specific in your life and take that format, you actually start to see where your faulty thinking is, and you start to change your belief system and your perception of it. So cognitive behavioral therapy, I mean, they use it today because it's short-term therapy and it goes quicker than the talk therapy. Although I don't rule talk therapy out because talk therapy can be extremely therapeutic for people who need it, who have more trauma involved with their loss. So, and being a past psych nurse, I am a big believer in that. And you can't find a lot of that today. A lot of it is medication and CBT, and you will find certain people that will do the talk therapy as well. Psychologists, nurse practitioners, psychiatrists, not so much, but yeah.
Interesting. You know, and one of the tools they had was intercessory prayer as a way to put others in your thought process. And as a Christian, you know, I do believe in intercessory prayer, but I thought, is this just Christian based? But no, you know, every denomination from Christian to Islamic to Judaism to Buddhism, they all have forms of prayer. So intercessory prayer is putting ourselves asking for praying for another person. And sometimes, you know, getting out of our own, you know we're feeling the sadness. It can be very hard to be at work when we're feeling sadness, but if the sadness is overwhelming, think of someone that you know that's going through a hard time and just pray to whoever you pray for them. And by stepping out, it takes our mind off sometimes what's going on. It can be just a very quick, like, hey, God, or hey, Buddha, or hey, universe. I'm really worried about my friend Susie. Can you just keep her in sight? Or I'm praying for her. I'm sending good wishes. But sometimes it's getting out of ourselves. That's why being isolated when you're in sadness is very difficult, because it can just help it perpetuate the sadness. Where if we step out and be in service to others, so often that can help lift us from it doesn't make it go away, but it can lift us to a different level, a higher level of contentment.
Having come from many religions in my life, um, I think prayer is powerful. You know, however you want to look at it, you want to look at it through physics and words and the power of the universe. However you want to look at it, if it makes you feel better, do it. I remember spending time in the chapel when my mother was in a coma and I needed her to come out of the coma so I could get my brother back in the will. And the only way to do that was for her to be awake and get the lawyer there at a certain time. And I remember praying in the chapel. It was easy for me. I was used to it being a Catholic at one point. I've attended Jewish synagogues. I mean, you know, I practice Buddhism now, but it I think rituals are really powerful. And she did, by the way, wake up for whatever reason, whatever you want to believe. But she did, and I did get the lawyer there, and we got my brother back in the will and averted a big disaster with the family. But so I do think that's important. And I also think something else is really important. I have a friend who ends all of her emails with remember to breathe. And breathing is really important. So we act kind of like we have to hold our breath when we're grieving, you know, because we're in a zone of time stands still. And if you do that and you don't take full breaths, what you're doing is you're suppressing everything, and then you're just, it's kind of like choking, you know, and or passing out because you forget to breathe. You forget to deep breathe, hold, you know, by holding your breath, and you don't even realize you're doing it when you're grieving or you're so sad. You're very shallow with all of your breaths. And I find pausing sometimes, just taking a deep breath, and it just kind of neuro regulates your system, you know.
I love that. Breathing is that goes into yoga work, that, you know, where breath is so, sometimes yoga is a great thing to do to help unlock your sadness. And finding someone that knows how to do grief yoga, that's so powerful. But breathing is such a, it just calms us, it settles us. The other, one of the tools that they had was to not be afraid to cry freely and to let those tears come and cry freely. That's hard to do in the workplace. And, not be afraid when it does happen. I remember a friend of mine, her husband died unexpectedly in his late 40s, and we were walking in somewhere to a meeting, and she's like, was overcome and got all tear and she's like, I'm sorry." I said, "Why would you be sorry? Cry, cry, it's okay. It's okay to, express those feelings." And I said, "It's the only time it's not is when you hold it in." It's not always acceptable, like I said, in the workplace, but when you can, and that's why you had mentioned watching sad movies. Sometimes we just need to cry to get that out. And the other thing is to slow down enough to savor the feelings of sadness and to savor the feelings of grief, because we need to acknowledge that we're sad. This is a sad time and that we are grieving. And by acknowledging our feelings, by leaning in, it's gonna help us work through them.
Yeah. Grieving, they say, is, or some therapists teach their clients to grieve in stages. And if you're at work, you may need to take breaks more frequently than usual, so you can find a quiet place to go to, a place to cry. I know I've done this in the past where I just couldn't handle some of the sadness I was feeling, and I would just go off into the bathroom and just cry, or take a walk outside if you can do that, which is really good because you get the air. If it's sunny, you get sun, and it makes you feel a little better, more alive. So grieving in stages is good because you can't just say, okay, this is ongoing. I have no place to go, so I have to just suck it in. No, you can actually take breaks from work and try to do something with that. Even if you have to disappear for a little bit, have somebody else cover for you, whatever it takes. But this is one thing you can do. The other thing that I often think of, they always talk about sadness. You can't fix always a broken heart, but really, when you look at sadness and grief, it's really a lot to do with the brain being broken versus the heart being broken. And, loss is a major stressor, and it triggers the pituitary gland, which then leads to increased cortisol in the body, and that cortisol builds up, and because you don't have all your centers operating, you have a fear center that's overactive. All your centers now are overactive, and now you're creating all this cortisol, and this can lead to a very deep depression. It feels like you're drowning. And then of course your amygdala in the brain is the sleep, and the mood is affected with that. And the hippocampus then is affected with memory. People don't have great memory when they're sad because they forget a lot. And stress hormones, are unregulated at this point.
Yeah.
And so, when we think of a broken heart, and by the way, people do die from broken hearts, but it has a lot to do with the regulation in the brain and all the hormones in the body and all the centers that are affected with it. So really, grieving can be, and sadness, if not taken and using tools and using whatever you can to just kind of have some support with it. I'm not saying grief doesn't go away, but it does lose itself. The intensity of it does change over time, but it's always there. We always have sadness for moments, but it's not this flood we get initially. So I
So,
just thought I'd mention that.
and yeah, as being in the workforce, the flood comes in and we're forced to go back to work. And that's why we think it's so important to talk about these tools, because we are forced to go back to work. We can't just say, we're going to take the next few months off. Um, you have a baby, you get 12 weeks off. My niece's husband got 6 months paternity leave, paid paternity leave where he works. Well, I would like to know their bereavement policy because, gosh, that's a lot. But could you imagine if you were able to have even a month of bereavement leave? It would be such a gift. But we are not overall, most Americans, there might be some companies that do, and kudos to the ones that do, but most of them don't give us that kind. So finding ways that we can be productive at work. One of them is, the heart chakra. I'm not that knowledgeable in all the chakras. I know they start at the head and go down, but sometimes just massaging your chest. If you can't leave your desk, if you're in a meeting, you can't leave and you're overwhelmed with a wave of sadness, just massage your chest. There's your heart chakra there. But, just sometimes focusing on just the simple movement of massaging your chest can help um, release that sadness or let it dissipate the sadness enough for you to get through the day, through the meeting. And that's getting up, like Colleen was saying, taking walks, but just something as simple as this, or just putting your hand there and holding it there and drawing your energy to your heart can help.
Maureen, one of the things I learned when I was becoming an end-of-life doula was placing your hand on your heart, but also on your
Yep.
abdomen or your belly button, right by your belly button, and deep breathing. And then you can visualize the breath traveling up to your heart through the chakra centers and just taking deep breaths and then visualizing your heart expanding, feeling full of love, feeling cared for, things like that. Those are powerful. And you can write your own meditation if you want. You don't have to follow anybody's thing. I mean, I did it in the beginning. I had to. I was teaching there, and I had to follow it the way the founder wanted us to follow it. But ever since then, I do my own thing, and that's what my body adapts to the best. So I think that was very important by placing your hand and your heart. The other thing is to not be afraid to be reminded of your loved one, in especially at work, placing a picture on the desk. Some people just want everything gone, every reminder gone. And that's not always the healthiest thing to do. I mean, it's really kind of remember they were here and they walked this earth and they were part of your life and you love them. And putting the picture on your desk is kind of a reflection, and it could even be a meditation. The other thing that is really important, Maureen, I think you may have mentioned it already, is aerobic exercise. Walking out in nature is really important. Gratitude journals, as you mentioned before, are really important. So you have to kind of find what your flow is and what you can do and follow through with. But don't underestimate any of this because it's really powerful.
I love the idea of gratitude journals. So often we are encouraged to end our day with gratitude and that we are but if you're at work and you have a moment of deep sadness, you can just say, what am I grateful for in this moment? You can think it or you can write it down in that moment, and it will just bring you back to the present, bring you back to a place where you can continue your workday, because really that's what all of this is about, is how to cope at work during times of grief and sadness. But it works for other things too. It doesn't have to be just at work, but I think that's what my focus has been, is what is beneficial at work. But I love gratitude journals. I think that they help us in so many ways, because we might think, oh, we have nothing to be grateful for. And when you really look around, I'm grateful that I have a light switch that I can turn on and have light today. That's a gratitude. Not everyone in our world has that. And so it doesn't have to be this big thing. It could be something as simple as that. I'm grateful I saw this snail slowly crawling across my sidewalk. It's little things that can make us smile. I'm saying that because I saw a snail in a shell today, and we don't have many of those up here in the Pacific Northwest. Um, but I was just fascinated by it because we had a lot of them in California when I was growing up. But just those little moments, they take us that lift our spirits. Another thing that people run into at work is just, are you not over it yet? Or can't you just buck up and handle it? Take a deep breath, go back to Colleen's breathing. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with anyone that's sad at work. It means that the other person maybe is not as empathetic as they should be. And it's our place that we can take a deep breath and we can say, that's their, you know, that's how they want to respond. I get to choose how I respond and I'll be empathetic towards them. Sometimes when we're sad, it's hard to think that, but if someone says something like that to us, to just take that breath and say, okay, I'm going to realize they're not coming from how it sounded, because I think that happens all the time at work. Even outside of work, people say, "Aren't you over it yet?" Or, "Gosh, your husband died 6 months ago. Are you still grieving?" So, so just take that breath. Breathing is just one of the best tools Colleen gave us. It helps with everything.
I think that's an important point though, because people don't know what to say and they feel uncomfortable. And so what you have to do is just understand they're just uncomfortable. They don't really, their intent really isn't to hurt you, but don't listen to them. And 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 don't put a whole lot on people who grow impatient to you, which leads me to another point of surrounding yourself, and this is a careful process, with people who are positive and enthusiastic about life, not people who say, get over it or overlook your sadness, but people who have this enthusiasm for life. And you might even respect somebody who's gone through something very similar than you have, but has come and resurfaced and still can see the joy in living. Because when you're down and you're feeling sad, you tend to, or I know I have tended to, not see a whole lot of joy in living. But so I find that when I surround myself with people who understand me and love life and are enthusiastic, that gives me hope. And so it gives me hope that I will pull out of this, or and love being around those people because I feel comfortable. And that doesn't mean they're high energy and they're doing this and they're doing that. They just have this like enthusiasm for life. It's kind of hard to describe. It exudes from them. But they're loving and caring and compassionate. And that, if you can find people like that versus the Debbie Downers of the world, oh, I don't know, you just got to get over it. It doesn't work very well.
That reminded me by you saying that, sometimes if you have a trusted coworker that you can confide in and say, "You know what? I'm really struggling today. If you see me being a little sad or down, can you do something to make me laugh, or just know that I'm going through this today?" Just knowing that you have that one confidant. And I think it's easier for women than for men to do this, but it's just equally as important for men to deal with their sadness and to work through it as it is for women. But find that one coworker that you could confide in that can be empathetic and help you through. So,
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I know we're running out of time, but caring for plants and having animals around is really helpful.
oh, I didn't even talk about animals. I love
I
animals.
know, and it just reminded me. So, well, we're almost out of time right now. In fact, we are, and we thank you for viewing A Different Kind of Doula. My name's Colleen, and I'm here today with my colleague and co-host Maureen. And we're from Gentle Passage Doula Collective. Catch us on gentlepassagedoulacollective.com. And you will find our classes there. You will find events. We have a death cafe every month, and we're growing and teaching out in the community. And so I think I've covered everything, and we have a face page as well, gentlepassagedoulacollective.com. You can find us on Facebook. Take care, everybody. Till next week.
Bye-bye.